King. Gridiron 360s. 360s. Gridiron 360 hitting you on the mics. Got a little Bill, got a little Dave. We are going to relive championship weekend 2019 in college football. We are at a close, and the postseason is all that's left in front of us, my friend. We've got some great games ahead for this college football playoff, as well as some great bowl games in New Year's Six games. But I really enjoyed championship weekend. There were some good games, some good battles, some not so much. But let's start with the first game on the slate. We'll run down these championship games based on when they fell, the time of the day, in chronological order. And that starts with the Pac-12 championship. This was on Friday night at 8 o'clock. Game took place in the 49ers Stadium in Santa Clara as Oregon and Utah went head-to-head, and I was thrilled that this game was prime time so the nation could see really what these two teams were made of if they hadn't yet this year. Utah comes in with a ranking of 5 with the one loss they had on the season on the road to Southern California, and really a bit at the fourth slot in the championship game should LSU have beaten Georgia. And Oregon, unfortunately, losing to Arizona State here a couple weeks ago late in the season, giving them 2 losses, coupled with that start of the season loss to Auburn, knocked them out of the playoff race, unfortunately. I was very high on Oregon and Mario Cristobal and Justin Herbert all season long, and unfortunately, they slipped up a little bit, and they weren't able to put them in position to make this game a play-in for that fourth slot. But, Dave, it was a good game in the Pac-12 championship regardless. What'd you think? What'd you think about this game? You have this Utes team that's been one of the best defensively in terms of statistics across the country. You got a Utes team that has a quarterback who, going into the game, was extremely efficient, pretty accurate, throws a great deep ball, had only thrown 2 picks all year long in Tyler Huntley. And you got a running back in Zach Moss that quietly is one of the top running backs in the country.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for starters, we've talked a lot about liking coaches, and, I'm a really big fan of Kyle Whittingham. That's just a dude, I look at him and I hear him talk. I just would never want to be on his bad side in a dark alley.
No.
He's just a bad dude.
No, I think I said something at the beginning of the year. Like, I was listening to some commentators and they were talking about, like, out of all the coaches in D1 college football, which one would you not want to get in the octagon with?
I can't
and
think of
Whittingham
one.
came
Whittingham.
up, I think, more than once.
Yeah, he's so, and why I say that is because the toughness that he exudes in his personality and in his approach translates to his team. And his team's not flashy. It's never really been flashy. But, man, I expect them to go in, and you just got to expect to get punched in the mouth. Even when they lose, you got to expect at some point. Now, and I'll say this, which has been kind of interesting with Oregon. I know you've been really high on Oregon, and there's a lot to like about Oregon. Challenge I've had with them over the year has been the consistency from the way that they play. And I'll use an example, some examples in this game as we kind of talk through it. And one of the things that I haven't seen a lot lately is Herbert really
Be the man.
Be the man and take control of the game.
Because they're running.
But he hasn't had to at points. So in fairness,
because they play good D and they have a good offensive line and they're a running team and they're not that Oregon team of the Chip Kelly era.
No,
just
certainly
slinging
not.
around
Certainly
the yard,
not.
even though they have this first round draft.
But he's a dominant force on that offense, and so. Kind of coming into this game, expectations were, how is Oregon going to take the punch in the mouth that everybody expected out of Utah? What came out of this game was, I will say, this to me of all the games, even with what happened in the Big Ten, as an example, this was the most surprising game from front to back. Not necessarily in the result, but more so in how it was played and what my expectations were. Herbert didn't really blow it up in this game, but the running game was there offensively, and Verdell was fantastic in this game. Goes for 208 yards, had a big long rip, 70 yards, had 3 TDs. Herbert was effective, but actually was, from just an efficiency standpoint, it was pretty level with Huntley. Now, the big thing in this game to me, and going back to Utah, was this is the most dominating performance I've seen Oregon play defensively all year. I mean, think about this. They had 6 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
They only, number one, the emergence, and we thought we were seeing it. There was a game in the middle of the year. Maybe it wasn't Washington. It was before Washington, where Kayvon Thibodeau, the number one recruit freshman DN, kind of had a little bit of a showing, and then kind of disappeared a little bit. Man, he came to play in this game.
He was an animal in this game.
He had 2.5 sacks. Well, there was only another half sack from the line. It was the activity from the linebacking core. They had 2.5 sacks from the linebacking core, which what that tells me is, Utah wants to go in and they want to run the ball. And while Moss ended up with a very good day statistically, it wasn't so in the first half. He was struggling. Huntley was struggling mightily in this game because they had a very good defensive game plan coming at this team. Oregon more so was more aggressive and attacking than I've seen them this year. Sometimes you just put hat on hat and you rely on the athleticism and strength of your team, and they've done that a few times this year and done it well. This time they game planned into this, and it was. I got to tell you, if I'm going to hang my hat on this Oregon team next year, you're going to hang your hat on this defense. I mean, this defense is young enough to be very dominant.
And part of that is, not Herbert's going to be leaving, obviously, but that offensive line we talked about all year, it's one of the, if not the most veteran offensive line, one of the best in the country, but they do have a lot of pieces on that offensive line that'll be gone as well.
Yeah, I think they lose, 4 out of 5 or something like that.
At least
it's
3,
it's
if not
big.
4, yeah.
So what I saw in this game was really Oregon just throwing confusion at Utah that I don't think Utah see. I got to be honest with you, I don't know if I've seen it out of a Pac-12 defense like this all year long. So, that was really interesting. And I think what happened is, as you can see in the game, Oregon was up by 20 points at halftime.
Yep.
But this is where Whittingham comes in. He got in there at halftime and he made some big adjustments, and they didn't do, again, anything flashy. And you can see in the third quarter, it was 15-3 was the point margin. So they kind of whittled their way back into the game. It was 23-15. And then Oregon was able to kind of put this sucker away.
Well, they, right at the end of the third, Utah scores, to give them that 15 points. Mm-hmm. And then that was right towards the end because then the fourth quarter started, right? And I sent this out on a post on our Facebook page, and it was a phenomenal 70-yard scamper by C.J. Verdell.
Yep.
But don't get it twisted. My comment was O-line, and they had been talking about it too in the broadcast because Utah was bringing everybody up to the line. Yep. And stacking the box. There was no one back behind deep. There was no safety coverage back there, and all it took was a little crack. Well, on that play, God, I can't remember the guy's name. Their left tackle, I believe it was, makes an incredible block, really, just to give a big crack for Verdell, who doesn't need it to see, and just right through. There was no one on the backside. So yes, it was a great run. All the credit to the world of the offensive line for that. All he needed, he
just
stacked
needed the
it.
seam and
he
go.
needed that crack. He found it. He was gone. They answered right after Utah had 15 points in the third to Oregon's 3. One of those touchdowns coming right there at the end of the third, and they come right back getting the ball at the top of the fourth. Oregon does and answers with a touchdown.
Yeah, and I think that was it. Like that to me was the game. It was the back and
forth. It was the dagger.
It was because what happens there is Utah's betting when they're bringing that pressure, which they can do when they have to and do it well. is they want to create confusion and mistakes. And the thing that was interesting about this was, and I give Oregon a lot of credit, the wave of momentum was shifting heavily on them.
Yeah.
Is they didn't crack. They didn't make the mistake. They stuck to what they do best, which is your point, is let the O-line block and let these Verdell, as an example, he's usually the lead back, let him eat. And he
Yeah, they
took
all
a big
the
bite.
backs really had a great day. Dye had a good day. Habibi Likio got involved. I put a message out on the Facebook along with that, like congrats to Oregon.
Yep.
And then I said, and hats off to Coach Whittingham and Utah for coming out of the locker room and making it a game. And because at the end of the third quarter, it was a one-score game. It was
8 points. Yeah.
8 points, 23-15, and they were in it.
Yep.
And I put that out there, and one of my friends, Mr. John Cristodoro, if you're listening, LSU homer, was like, "Yeah, I guess if you call 31-15 beat down, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "No," or 30-15. I'm like, "Listen, man, that you're not looking at it right, because they did come out of the locker room and make it a game." Okay,
Yeah.
Now the fact that Oregon was able to answer at the top of the fourth with that play and pretty much put them away with that, was able to put the nail in the coffin pretty much, is a whole different story. But they came out of the locker room losing. They were losing 20-0. And they came out and made some really good adjustments to get themselves within a score in this game.
This is very much, to me, a very interesting, and why you talk about these coaches with the regard you do, because Oregon coming out with a game plan that was not expected in the way that they played in the first half of the game.
I thought they
But then
threw the ball much more than they ran it, even though it didn't,
Look like-
statistically it doesn't say. But to your point earlier, Herbert hasn't had to do much because of the scheme and the run game. But I don't think that he needed to do this. I think they did it strictly to get Utah off balance.
This was the big blow for big blow. This was a heavyweight battle. Both teams got wobbly against the ropes at different points in this game, but answered.
Yep.
And unfortunately, Utah had dug themselves too big of a hole.
Yeah.
And Oregon really had that final answer, and that was really impressive. It made the game, while you look at it on the surface and say, yeah, you know what, especially with a 20-0 lead, it was a blowout game, but it really wasn't if you watched it. It was one of those games that just really went kind of back and forth. And it was interesting. And I give the credit to the coaching staffs because not only the adjustments, but the ability for them to get their players to play within themselves and to play the style of game that they needed to play. They clearly had the buy-in from the players on both sides. And, again, these are two teams that had, Utah having one stumble during the year and Oregon having two stumbles that I think are much better football teams than probably, on the outside looking in, you might just go, these are two lost teams. These are two very good teams.
Yeah.
And
I think Herbert
could have been interesting.
I think Herbert, now that he's going to be going into the draft, I think that was the game he was waiting for. It's a reason he stayed around another year.
Yep.
And he had a great year all around. But again, he wasn't as needed as he has been in past years because of the dynamic of the running game in their offense. But this game, again, not that they needed to do it. I think they were doing it to kind of mix it up on Utah instead of running, and then throwing when need be. I think they had a good balance, and he made some great throws, and he really, I think, solidified his draft stock with this game. He looked good in this game. He looked like the guy that everyone's like, wow, that kid's going to be something.
Yeah, and I think in this for Oregon for the future, again, I go back to their defenses. I'm really interested, and I hope this isn't a flash in the pan, but Thibodeau's the kind of guy that can end up being in 2 years a Chase Young. The guy came in, you looked at him, he looked like he was 28 years old when he came out of high school.
Yeah.
Had the build. He's got a mean mug, that dude. He looks a little dangerous too. But he just, he's physically imposing. Question is, can this kid, and as a freshman, you don't necessarily expect him to be able to do it consistently because there's a lot to learn, but can he develop his skill set to where he can truly take over games? This is a game where he kind of showed that I've got the skill set. Now do I have the want to be that elite level player, which is something, honestly, you don't really go out and look for guys like that out in the Pac-12.
No,
historically.
no.
So.
Look, this was a great game. But again, there's little things especially at this level of play and in Division I college football, the little things mean a lot.
Yep.
And the turnover battle was huge in this.
Yeah,
and I started saying Tyler Huntley, super efficient. He's thrown 2 picks all year. Well, in this game, he matched
doubled
it
it up.
with 2 picks.
Yep.
And that, that
And he was
was a big problem. That
and
caused
he's
those
a
2
mobile
picks.
quarterback, and he was under duress
Yep.
this entire game, and he played through it to a degree, but it just shows you how strong this team can be. And it'll be interesting to see, does this evolve into a defensive team in a conference that really outside of Stanford historically does not have monster defenses?
Yeah, and you're right. And it kind of, I got to be honest, Oregon disappoints me because this defense did show flashes of what we saw in this Pac-12 championship game. Like, wow, that's good defense. But
Other games they weren't.
Yeah,
They
I
would
mean, like
disappear.
Arizona State. I'm not saying that Jaden Daniels kid isn't good and Ayuk isn't good and Enos isn't good and they don't have good players, but that defense didn't show up in that game. It's almost like they were just looking ahead to this game, and as a result, they're not playing in the playoff, quite frankly.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
I heard a lot of people yapping. Should Oregon have scheduled that out of conference with Auburn at the beginning of the year? Because if they didn't, and they had a cupcake, they would have 1 loss. They would be in the playoff. You're splitting hairs here. Because
Well, yeah,
it
but
could be-
that question lies though: is would there have strength of schedule?
it wouldn't have mattered
have given
because
them
of
the
the
power.
1 loss.
Well, they would
have-
be going up against Oklahoma. I mean, you got to
Right.
think, who have you beat as a one-loss team? So they may
And
not have gotten
I think beating, if they were there, they might have been higher than Utah. But even if they weren't, they would be 1 loss playing a Utah team sitting at 5, and Oregon is playing a Baylor team sitting at 7, and they're at 6.
Yeah. Now, I'm a believer in this. College football landscape, it makes no sense in Power 5 conferences to schedule more than 2 power teams. Legit power teams. I'm not talking about playing the bottom of going playing Duke. I'm talking about playing 2 good out-of-conference games a year. I think it's crazy when you get into 3 and 4. And most teams don't have 4 but you do have to be careful. There's no point in scheduling the FCS teams more than 2 because you only get credit for 1 win as it relates to bowl eligibility. So I will be disgusted by college football if with this playoff, and the playoff's broken if this happens, where teams don't play those games.
No, I agree. I mean, like, you could look at it either way. Yes, I mean, that sucks that they took that loss, and they shouldn't have lost to Arizona State. But taking that close loss when they were winning to Auburn, scheduling that game, now it hurts them. Now they're on the outside looking in, so that sucks. But at the same token, you look at a team like mine, like Clemson, not that I don't think we would have been in if we didn't have to play A&M and we played another, scrub and won. But if we were undefeated either way, we'd be in. But we schedule those games on purpose, not just to test us and test our team, but that if it comes down to the wire, that is going to hold more weight than scheduling UMass.
Well, yeah, and remember something. Go back to Clemson's run last year, and Clemson was phenomenal last year. Phenomenal. One of the best I've ever seen. Very, very good. And they played an A&M team early in the year, and they scheduled that before the Jimbo Fisher, but that was, obviously that got a lot more metal to it,
Right.
with Fisher having the Florida State history with them and playing them. And that was a close game. And as you've mentioned, it took Lawrence coming out of that game and Kelly Bryant coming in and to help you in that game. So, I get, like right now I look at Florida State and, Florida State's really down, but this is a team that's going to play Alabama. They got them scheduled for home and homes. They got LSU scheduled for home and homes. They are supposedly having, I think this is the one that hasn't been signed yet they've signed Georgia and have not officially signed LSU, but those are believed to kind of be done in theory. So you're talking about, a team that even if they rise to the mountaintop, those are going to be huge games. And I think college football needs those. Clemson has scheduled Georgia how many times? Those were big games. I mean, you guys don't play scrubs. Now, again, it is what it is. So anyway, we're kind of getting off topic here, but important stuff. But let's move on.
Well, before we do, the outcome of the game was what, 37-15
Yep.
Oregon. As a result, that put Utah at 11. They will take on. They have a New Year's Eve game, 7:30 on New Year's Eve they'll play Texas in the Alamo Bowl. So
Okay. All right.
we'll see how that fares. I think Texas has fallen off. I think they could get destroyed by Utah, but we'll see. And then for, though they don't get the playoff, I guess they get the next best thing as Oregon Pac-12 champs, now sit at number 6 in the final ranking, will play Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl.
That is actually an intriguing matchup.
Yep, that's
The
New Year's Day,
Yep.
5 o'clock, Rose Bowl.
Leaves a little bit to be desired overall, in my opinion, in the New Year's Six, but that is one of the intriguing matchups. Obviously, we'll get into what happened with Wisconsin, but definitely some teams that bring some interesting things to the dance.
Yep. So the next game that we're going to get into was the starting game on our Saturday slate, and that was the Big 12 Championship. It took place at noon in Dallas at Jerry World with Baylor and Oklahoma in the rematch.
Did not disappoint.
It was
disappoint.
Now our friend Heath Hans, who's an OU grad, I was texting back and forth before the game, and he's like, you could tell in his text he was a little concerned. I go, keep in mind, there's one thing that you didn't have last time that you will now, and that is CD.
Yep.
And he was involved. He made a difference in this game.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. I mean, this is a guy that, in that first game that Oklahoma's down by 25, they make this tremendous comeback, and it was all on the shoulders of Jalen Hurts. Let's not get it twisted. But this time they didn't need to do so much, and the involvement of CeeDee Lamb helped them.
Yeah. I here's the thing I give a lot of credit to. Like, first of all, remember something. Baylor, right when the playoffs came out, the first couple of weeks was sniffing around that 12 spot. I think they got as high as 9. They weren't getting a whole lot of respect. This team is 2 scores away from an undefeated season and an automatic waltz into the big dance. And I give their coach, Matt Rule, so much credit. Did I call him Matt Rule? It's Mike Rule. It's Matt Rule. Okay, because I called him Mike Rule last time. I get it confused. But anyway, this game, they left it all out on the table. As you can tell, it went to overtime, which tells you everything you need to know. What I was most impressed with was the game plan against Hurts. CeeDee Lamb was fantastic. Just to give you an idea, at 173 yards, next closest receiving yardage was 24. This guy was the passing offense for this team. And Hurts went 23 times on the ground for only 38 yards. So Baylor had a great plan against him, more so than even in their other loss to Kansas State. They held Hurts in check on the running side. Now, he did really well through the air as far as efficiency, 17-24, but they still pushed him into an interception, so they got a turnover. I mean, they played this game tough, and the big story of this game that won't get pressed later, but we all watched it, is Baylor had to go through 3 quarterbacks.
I mean, just
3 quarterbacks.
Just the Zeno kid, the third one, the freshman that came in, and, first play throws this, 15-yard crossing route to the back who takes it to the house. First play.
Yep.
Comes in the next series and like the second or third play throws another pass that dude takes all the way down. I mean, like, it was pretty impressive in that setting that a freshman quarterback that hadn't really seen the field at all this year, because Bohannon, when Brewer was out this year, Bohannon took the reins.
Yep.
And I think they had said Zeno had thrown like 2 passes all year.
Yep.
And he had going into this game out of like 3 passes, 2 of them were touchdowns. It was like some ridiculous.
Well, how about
stat.
this? He only threw 6 passes in this game and only completed 2 for 159 yards.
Oh, he didn't have 2 touchdowns, but he threw one that got him down deep.
But he did. But he had huge. But here's the thing about this is to be able to recover. I mean, Brewer was hurt early. Went only 3 for 6 for 15 yards. Was injured early. Bohannon came in, got a touchdown, but then was largely ineffective and had to go out of the game. And Zeno comes in and just gets it done. And again, they had nobody run the ball more than 9 times, and that 9 times was by a quarterback. It was by Bohannon.
That was a problem, though, because at the end of the day, time of possession was 36 minutes to 23 in favor of Oklahoma. Rushing yards was 50 rushes for 146 for Oklahoma, 29 rushes for 35 yards for Baylor. Oklahoma ran 74 plays for a total of 433 yards to Baylor's 56 for 265. And last stat, Oklahoma had 21 first downs to Baylor's 8.
Yep.
So they couldn't if Baylor was able to establish the run a little bit better, I think that I think right there is why those numbers are completely lopsided because they couldn't control. They didn't have the ball long enough. They couldn't control the game, the clock, the other team. They couldn't establish that run the way they needed to.
Look, I got to be honest with you. Matt Rule should change his last name to MacGyver because he put together this game with a friggin' straw and a piece of bubble gum, and built a helicopter. It was amazing to be in this game. Everything was stacked against them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, really, right out
Well,
of the gate.
you look at those. Statistically,
This should have been a blowout.
it should have been a blowout because you're talking they more than doubled most of those stats. And the final score was 30-23. And believe me, it was close.
It was overtime.
It went
overtime.
OT.
Plain and simple.
OT.
And they had to score a touchdown, and that's what got him at the end. I think this is fantastic for Baylor going forward. Fantastic. I think this spells great things. They can rely on defense. They got some young kids on offense, some looks to help them for the future. This is a team that you better be careful of going forward. This is a team that's going to win a lot of games under Matt Rule. Only concern I have is whether this guy gets poached because he's going to be a hot commodity going forward. Again, he's kind of – what's interesting about Baylor is they played some close games this year and not really gotten the credit. Remember, we know about how high they've been. But they know he's taught them how to win. And just look at what this guy's done in 3 years with this culture. What were they, 1-10 or 1-11 their first year, 7-6 the next year, and now they're 2 scores away from being 13-0 or whatever it is. So it's just an unbelievable performance. I'm really excited for some of the coaching that's going on in college football right now, and some of the guys that are really just stepping up and getting it done. Now on the other side, I do want to give some credit to Oklahoma. Again, beating a team twice is extremely hard. And to go in and do that in another hard-fought game, because remember the first game, Baylor got out quick, scored offensively. So it was kind of a tale of two stories here in these two games, and Oklahoma had to do everything in their power to come back. So this was an interesting game. And obviously had huge implications, right?
Right. So now, because of the Utah loss, and we'll talk about the SEC championship game, but we know that Georgia took a hit, and they were sitting at 4, and Oklahoma slides in there at the 4 slot with the victory here. They will take on the number 1 team in the land in the Peach Bowl on December 28th at 4 p.m., and that is LSU. And for Baylor, they will play the Bulldogs in the Sugar Bowl, which if the Bulldogs don't get healthy, they're going to have trouble here, man. That game is Wednesday, January 1st.
I think you're going to have trouble regardless.
Yeah, that's January 1st, 8:45 p.m. on ESPN. Again, Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, Georgia, Baylor. One thing I do want to say before we move on from this game, the post-game presser with Matt Rule, I tip my hat to Oklahoma. From what I heard and what I saw, it was probably 60 to 70% Oklahoma fans in that crowd in the game. There was a small contingent of Baylor fans, but at the end of the game, at least per Matt Rule and his presser, when they were walking off the field, the Oklahoma contingent was applauding Matt Rule and Baylor for what they've done, the season they've had, the fight in them, and I give credit. That's great respect from Oklahoma. And the last thing I want to say is, earlier in the year, the Sooner Schooner took a bad spill, and they had to shut it down for the year. However, it came out.
They brought it back.
Big 12 championship game, so it must have given them a little.
Well, I think they kind of learned a little bit of a lesson. If you ever watch the Sooner Schooner, it does a quick beeline out of the tunnel, but then does a big spin and goes back into the tunnel, and that's some of the danger. In this game, they went straight.
Yeah. Go straight.
They went straight.
All right, the next game we want to talk about, and this was on at this is the 3:30, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And this was the American Athletic Conference Championship. We don't want to spend too much, but this did have implications between Memphis and Cincinnati, who are back-to-back weeks going at it. And if you remember, last week the game was in Cincy. I think it was in Cincy. Maybe it was in Memphis. I can't remember.
I
Anyways,
think it was in Memphis.
Memphis pulled it out and won the game. So then they have a rematch this week because they were both the top teams in the AAC. This game, too, was in Memphis.
They're both one-loss teams.
Yep.
Cincinnati
and
losing to
Boise
Memphis.
State was up there as a non-power 5 to potentially
Yep.
slide in with one loss. So this was an important game.
An interesting,
Mike Norvell.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
We had talked about Mike Norvell. You had talked about your Knowles, how you thought they were going to go after him, but they're one of the things that tipped you off. It might have been Norvell was that they were waiting
The delay,
the
yeah.
delay, and I think the delay was due to the fact that they still had games to be played.
Couldn't announce it till after the championship.
And and sure enough, Memphis wins this game, but not long thereafter, the announcement came out that Norvell is going to Florida
Yeah,
State.
it leaked in the next day. They did the formal announcement at noon.
What'd you think about this game, though? I mean, it was a. Now, keep in mind the quarterback for Cincinnati, and I didn't get to see all the game last week, but he didn't play in the game last week. He was back this week for them, and last week when they played, it was a little. I wouldn't want to say lopsided, but Memphis had pretty much solid control of the game. This week, it was back and forth. They were trading scores.
Yep, absolutely. And I think it was it 10-7 at halftime? I think it was. I was watching it. 14-10. 14-10. That's right. Cincinnati scored near the end of the second quarter. So it was. Here's the interesting part. And we talk about coaching in this game, and I'll admit I have done a little bit more research than I had previously done once it started to look like Norvell was there. But both these coaches, Luke Fickell, if you'll remember, it was he coached the Ohio State team that was after the what's his name?
Urban?
No, before Urban. Or no, was it when Urban went out that he took over, or was it when the guy before Tressel went out? Did he coach? Either way, he was an interim. He was an interim coach at Ohio State.
I don't know if it was that far
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
but
No, I think it was.
It might have been.
Tressel was
Because
replaced by Urban Meyer, right?
Ryan Day was the only guy that came in as an interim under Urban Meyer
After Urban Meyer.
during his tenure.
when he got suspended, he did.
During his tenure.
Fickell was right before Urban Meyer came in because Fickell stayed. He stayed under Urban Meyer, I believe, for a year before he went, or it was a year or two. But anyway, I have to say this: like you watch these teams, and I watched them. You can see these guys void of talent compared to some of the Power 5 teams. But, man, the coaching and the ability to get the most out of your players, this is why these are dangerous teams. This is why when you schedule teams like this, if you're a big boy school, you better have your helmet strapped on because they understand what their deficiencies are, and they're gonna do everything they can to exploit their strengths. And one thing I really love about Memphis, the physicality with which they play, not just on defense, but even more specifically on offense. They've recruited some tough football players, and I'll say I saw a lot of that out of Cincinnati. Cincinnati's a good team. This is a very good team, and I think obviously Norvell's going to get his shot with a big-time program at Florida State. I don't know that Luke Fickell's going to be that far behind. May not be this year, but I think he's going to get his recognition. I think it was a great thing for him to go there. I don't think he was ready to take over a program as big as Ohio State in the manner that he would have if he would have been put in that position. But I think he's got a ton of talent within himself to be able to do some pretty cool things. Again, this game very, very much keep you off balance. These are two teams that'll keep you off balance in their play calling. Will go against the grain. But it was a really good game. It was a hard-fought game. I give the Memphis kids, and it says a lot to me. Again, I'm going to be a little bit of a homer and worrying about my future coach, but it says a lot that those kids, knowing that he was leaving, didn't bail on him and played hard for him.
Right.
That speaks to me to the character and the type of coach that he is. And what I loved about his press conference was at Florida State, he spent time talking about Memphis.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
that to me,
nice.
that is a cool thing. And there's talk whether he'll coach that game or not. It is known that Odell will coach the Florida State bowl game, which makes sense. I don't know whether that's just going to put Norvell out there recruiting or whether he's going to co-coach Memphis. I got to be honest with you. If he coaches Memphis, I got no problem with it.
Sure.
I think those kids deserve it if he can pull it off. But just great thing. And now they tell me about the implications of this. Where are we going to see these guys?
Well, and first of all, before we leave, the game, Desmond Ritter is the quarterback that came in for Cincy.
Yes.
That had been missing. And, he was all they had. He wasn't not a great day throwing the ball. 16 to 36, 233, no TDs and a pick. But he also rushed the ball 11 times for 113 and a TD.
Yeah.
But the guy I really want to note, and I'm not sure, I don't know what year he is, but the receiver for Memphis, Antonio Gibson, 11 carries on the ground. He's a receiver.
Yeah,
he's a receiver.
Him
11 carries
and
for 100.
Gainwell are kind of all over the place.
130 yards and a TD. Yes, he is a multi-faceted talent.
And it's funny because Gainwell, if you look at him, he looks like a receiver more than a running back.
Right.
It's just it's
right.
interesting.
And he was in the back. It wasn't just a receiver getting into rounds. He was lining up in the backfield taking handoffs. So just impressive. In terms of where these guys.
Before we get into that, I got one we're going to talk about because it goes with our awards.
Yes.
How about the tight end from Memphis, Joey Magnifico?
Oh, write that name down. Write it down. Here's a pen.
Is that not awesome?
Joey Magnifico. So, all right. So here's what we got. Unfortunately, and I do say unfortunately because it's not a great matchup or a great bowl, Cincinnati will play on November 2nd at 3 p.m. It's ESPN.
No, January 2nd.
I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah.
That would be amazing if
What
they
did I
could play
say?
on November 2nd.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry. January 2nd. 3 p.m. ESPN in the Birmingham Bowl against BC. Yeah, nothing really, no fireworks there for me. As for Memphis, they ended up, Boise won their game, but the opponent they played was an unranked Hawaii team, whereas Memphis took on a highly ranked in terms of the non-power
playoff,
5 teams. So they get the bid for the non-power 5 group of 5, I should say, New Year's Six Bowl, and they will take on Penn State Saturday, December 28th at noon. It's an ESPN game in Arlington, Texas, in the Cotton Bowl. So that actually could be a good one.
I like it because then Memphis can travel their fans, and obviously Penn State's got that following.
Yeah, and it's closer for Memphis.
Do not sleep on Memphis.
Yeah, that could
Don't
be a
sleep
good one.
on them.
So let's move into the next game, and this was the big one, one of the big ones. We knew that serious implications on the playoffs and the SEC championship that took place at 4 o'clock on Saturday here in the ATL. LSU and Georgia. Georgia wins. The thought process is both of them get into the playoff. Georgia and LSU. LSU wins. LSU's in. Georgia's out.
Yeah, it's this. We just got to state the obvious, and unfortunately, it's a spoiler alert for how the game ended. You got to understand where Georgia's coming in. Georgia does not have Cager in this game, already known. DeAndre Swift is injured in the previous game, and so therefore there was concerns about how effective or if he would play at all. They had the first half suspension of the one receiver, George Pickens, who was in a fight in the Georgia Tech game, but who has been coming on as of late. He was a 5-star, and he's a freshman.
Yep.
So he came in this game.
Then all of a sudden the game's going on, and they get absolutely decimated on top of those injuries with more. The next guy in line at receiver, Dominic Blaylock, from right up the road here at Walton, gets hurt. He goes out. They had guys falling left and right.
Yep, Fromm got hurt in this game too as well. So and had a pretty ineffective game overall. He did get some playing time. Did get back in the game. Here was the big problem, and I was listening to this game on the radio, the first part of this game on the radio, because I was going to a birthday party, thankfully, that had a TV, so I could watch it once I got there. But so this is the first play call I hear on the radio is, and the question was, and this was really about DeAndre Swift, who is the offensive machine for them this year. Even though Jake Fromm has had 2 great years to start out his career, his year this year has been certainly subpar compared to what we've seen in the past. So, the guy's announcing the game. He says, James Cook's in the backfield, Fromm in the shotgun. And then they said Swift moves from the receiver spot back into the backfield. And then they handed the ball off to James Cook. that told me what I needed to know, which is that Swift's not ready to go in this game,
Yep.
and that's a major problem
Huge blow.
in the matchup in this game. Georgia needed to play great defense and run the ball to beat an offensive just dynamo like LSU is, and right off the bat, you could see it didn't happen. And the game kind of unfolded like I thought. Unfortunately, even though there is some talent in that backfield for Georgia, they have the senior Harrion, who is, kind of taking a backseat to some of these superior backs for Georgia over his years, but is a decent complement piece. James Cook, their freshman, that's the little brother of Dalvin Cook, hasn't had any kind of spectacular year. Swift, again, only ran the ball 2 times and caught the ball 3 times, so he wasn't able to play. Fromm had a bad game. He was going to have – I said it when we did the preview. He was going to have one of his best games of the year.
He was under 50% again passing.
Yeah. 2 picks, under 250 yards, sacked. It wasn't a good game. I don't know what else to say. Georgia was outmanned, and then let's just say what it is.
We went into it and we were worried that their lack of production offensively could be an issue with a high-powered offense, and if they got too far behind, it could be trouble. And right out the gates, first quarter, 14-0 LSU.
Yep.
That was, that was it. You look at the plays. LSU had 26 first downs to Georgia's 20. The problem is that LSU, the reason that's not a bigger differential is LSU was just able to score quick.
Yep.
They didn't need to have so many, plays just chipping down the field. They were getting chunk plays, 68 plays for Georgia to 74 for LSU. So there's not a big differential there. But on those plays, Georgia had 286 yards to LSU's 481. So I think the biggest bugaboo for me, because running back Clyde Edwards-Hilaire went 15 for 57. Now that's good yards per average, but he's a good back. And what I see there is, they were able to keep Edwards. The Georgia defense was able to keep,
and Georgia's front is very good.
They were able to keep Edwards-Hilaire in check,
running the ball.
Yes. Now, I know that they wanted that, and if you watch the game, they defensively schemed to try not let Burrow carve them up. They didn't stack the box. They dropped 7-8 guys into coverage most of the time. Okay, I get that. But Georgia's got such great athletes on the defense, especially the defensive line. They got such a great defense that even just rushing 3 or 4, you need to get more pressure than you did. My man, Joe Burrow, was back there having tea and crumpets. And even if you're I get it. If you're going to play, and they pulled a scheme from Auburn, who did I think they ran a 3-1-7, 3 down linemen, 1 7 back deep, and that game ended up being 24-20. So they were trying to pull a page out of Auburn's defensive playbook, but at some point or another, when you're doing that, you're not getting pressure with those 3, 4. He's carving you up. Do you not try to maybe mix it up here and there and throw some blitzes and stunts and pressure at him? I'm not saying the whole game. If your game plan was to play back in a zone and to just try to make it hard for Burrow to find an open look, that's fine. But when it's not working, I'm not saying go completely away from it, but you got to mix it up a little bit, because he just had every time he dropped back, for the most part, all day long.
Here's the problem. This is the problem.
Look, LSU has a good all-line, but they're not that great.
But let me say, I said this to you before, but I said to me, it's 3 sections of the year. First section is learn who you are. Second section is perfect who you are. Third section is show everybody and be who you are. When you go and try to, the reason why Auburn was effective is because that's what Auburn does. That's who they are. Their defensive line, which is a credit to them about how dominant they are defensive line-wise.
That's correct.
They're not coming out of their element running that scheme. Georgia is. And when you do that, again, what are you going to have? You're going to have missed assignments. You're going to have guys playing in positions they're not normally playing in. and this is the thing about Joe Burrow, who is clearly, by the way, I think he's done it anyway, but just because we all know that the Heisman, we want to pretend it's not a quarterback award, but it is. The Heisman is over. It's over.
It was over it was over before the game, but the moment he made that one play where he had like 9 seconds, they finally started to get to him. He scrambles, and I posted this one too on our site with the HEISMAN night. HEIS, because he had the Heisman night. That was his moment where he rolled right and just, threw that bomb for the touchdown.
Well, here's something that I saw in this game too, and I've seen this from him before, and what I really like about him, his ball placement, his ability to make every type of throw. And when I say that, it's not like, can he go over the top? Can he do this? Joe Burrow can throw a bullet into a tight window, which you don't see a lot of that in college football because the athletic differences between teams. Usually when you're ultra talented, like I'll give Justin Fields as an example, hasn't had to make a lot of those throws because his athletes are so superior. I've seen against an SEC teams, which there are a lot of teams that have good defenses, though I would say overall defenses have been down in the SEC noticeably this year across the board. But I've seen him throw tight window throws and make all those different throws. What I liked that I saw was a little bit of what I'm seeing out of Trevor Lawrence, who has people have not given him credit for some of the things he's done. But you and I have talked a lot about this. Seeing Trevor Lawrence start to use his feet this year, and not to be a running quarterback, but to know when to go, and when he does it is such a dagger. Burrow did that in this game and ran for some tough yards, as evidenced by he went 11 for 41. But some of those runs were critical runs to sustaining drives. He had toughness. The kid's tough. He's not a run out of bounds all the time guy. He will dive forward as opposed to the slide. So I saw that, and like you said, he cemented the Heisman, but they had Georgia out of sorts. And I'm going to give a lot of credit. I talk about another up-and-coming coach. I think we'll see it, is their offensive he's a coordinator, passing game guy, whatever they call him, in Joe Brady. Whew. This guy's going to get a nod somewhere. He may go back to the pros, with what he gets. But anyway, he might be a hot commodity for whoever takes Joe Burrow, potentially. So, again, LSU proved that that they're the best team in the SEC. I mean, they proved it.
Yep.
And did it on the field. It wasn't a great game to watch, but it was great to watch LSU put the clinic on that they did.
Sure. So now, we mentioned it before. Georgia will play Baylor in the Sugar Bowl on New Year's Day at 8:45 in New Orleans, ESPN. That should be hopefully some of these guys for Georgia get healthier, so it's a more interesting game. And in terms of LSU, well, they vault back to number 1 over Ohio State because Ohio State, had a little fight on their hands and they dominated Georgia, and Georgia was ranked higher than Wisconsin, who Ohio State played. So they get back to the number 1 slot, and they are back here in a few weeks on December 8th at 4 p.m. ESPN, Atlanta, Georgia, in Mercedes-Benz Dome, as LSU, number 1, takes on number 4, Oklahoma. So that should be a good game. Let's move on to the next game, which was the 7:30 matchup, the Atlantic Coast Conference, buddy. The ACC, my Clemson Tigers, take on the Virginia Cavaliers in Charlotte. This is for all the marbles. A lot of folks said after Utah lost that a lot of folks before Utah lost said that there's the potential we could lose this game, being Clemson still be in. And then after the Utah loss, it was even a stronger case.
Yep.
But we didn't want to lose the game.
Wouldn't have been a good look.
Wouldn't have been a good look. So, we come out in this game. We kick off first. We all know that Bryce Perkins, the quarterback for Virginia, is a stud. And honestly, I've seen a lot of him, but getting to take him on and knowing our defense, he reminded me a lot of Lamar Jackson. He will be sought after more. I don't know if he's going out this year or whenever, but he is slippery. We talked about it the week before in the game against Virginia Tech that Virginia had like 497 yards of total offense, and 468 of that was between passing and running the passing and running skills of Bryce Perkins. It was all him. So you go into this game, we got a good defense, and we really need to do is stop one guy. They had been decimated by a lot of injuries. Their top cornerback, who's one of the best in the country and will be drafted probably in the first round, Bryce Hall's been out.
Yep.
We just need to take care of one guy. Well, that one guy comes out as they get the ball first and proceeds to march Virginia down the field on us rather easily. Now, Tanner Muse, our safety, number 19, has had a great year. I think from where he's started on our team to now, he's put himself maybe not to be drafted, but at least be picked up and given a look by a team. And he did not have a good game, really all game, but it started out right here in this first drive, him getting burned, and they go throw a pass in the end zone to take the lead 7-0. But after he got burned on the first big pass to Dubois, the receiver for Virginia, coach pulled him out of the game and put in the guy that's behind him, Nolan Turner, number 24, who is not even close to being as big and strong, but much faster than Tanner Muse. They're in the red zone, and like we've done a lot this year, getting a little concerned is this, but I said, you know what, we take the ball away when it comes down into that crunch area. And sure enough, Perkins throws a ball, and little quick old Nolan Turner gets an interception in the back of the end zone, gets 1 foot down, and we get the ball back. We proceed to go down the field and score rather easily. Their defense all day had nothing for us. Travis Etienne was running, not a lot, but he didn't need to because he was crushing them. Trevor had all day. T. Higgins, phenomenal. Everybody just clicking on all cylinders on offense. We proceed to score, kick the ball back. They proceed to march down again and score a touchdown this time on us, 7-7. The game proceeds from there, and, I did think that it would be a little bit of a fight for a quarter or a quarter and a half, and it was. But we were too strong, and, end of the day, first quarter ended 14-7. Second quarter, we owned it, 17-0 us. They put on a touchdown in the third, 14-7. We put 14 on, they put 7. At that point, the game was over. The starters come out. The backups come in, and we continue to roll them 62-17.
Yeah, nothing unexpected here. Clemson once again unloads the cupboard in the game and plays everybody. But yet you see guys like ETM. What did he have? Like 9 carries for 114 yards or something stupid like that. It's just something.
Yeah, he had 14 carries for 114 yards and a TD. T. Higgins, 9 receptions, 182 yards and 3 TDs. He had 2 in the first half. This is the third or the fourth week he's had multiple touchdowns in the first half.
Since I want to throw a little comparison, so I don't think anybody would be shocked by this, but Joe Burrow has had 18 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in those last 5 games. Trevor Lawrence has had 17 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. This is a guy that's been playing nose to nose, and the snaps aren't even close. They're not close because, there's been a lot of games where Lawrence has come out.
Every game except for North Carolina.
Yeah, so understands this is a team that's humming. And a congratulations to Isaiah Simmons, first ever Clemson Butkus Award winner.
Yes, I told you. And a congratulations, and we'll talk about them next, to Chase Young for getting a nomination as a defensive player for the Heisman Trophy. He will get to sit, and he sat 2 games this year because of that silly little debacle. He's deserving, but I talked to you about game changers, and I loved it. I saw that, and I put that out there. My man Isaiah Simmons, Butkus Award winner. It really made me happy. It made me happy. Yep. I've been talking about Isaiah for a while, and he isn't Chase Young. He might be a notch, but he's pretty damn important.
He's a different position. It's a different position.
Look, there was times in this game where I was like, we need Isaiah to make a play. He had a pick in this game.
Well, I saw him make a tackle running all the way down the field
to stop a touchdown
over his corner. What he overran his corner and made the tackle, whereas this is also a guy that plays up at the line of scrimmage and can handle anybody on the offensive line and make plays with it. Very good, where he's very I don't want to say he's underrated because he's certainly already getting the look as a top 10 pick, but for a linebacker that plays all over the field like him, one thing I've been really impressed with is his ability to use his hands on oversized guys.
Oh yeah,
Like that. And this guy's no featherweight, like he's built well.
Yep.
Very well.
Yep.
Reminds me in a way a little bit of a Brian Urlacher, but with a little more violence in his game.
and speed.
I
He's
won't
fast.
say well, yeah, but Urlacher was pretty damn fast.
This kid's fast.
But he but again, I don't want to compare him to a Hall of Famer yet, but physically speaking, he can go with him. Urlacher wasn't as good at the point of attack as he was. Now, also Urlacher played a rangy coverage, but this kid can do it all. He's the kind of guy you invest heavily in a couple of D tackles and you let him clean up all messes, and he could be just an amazing player because you can move him everywhere.
Yep. Now,
so he's dangerous.
he is. Now, in terms of yardage, we had a ton, 619 total yards, but they did put just 387 on us, just a shade under 400. So a lot of people might look at that and be like, ugh, man, that's Virginia? These other teams in the playoff, they're going to, LSU and Ohio State are going to go crazy. Understand something. We did much what Georgia was trying to do because Isaiah was being used a lot of the day, most of the day, as a spy on Perkins. And he would come up and rush the line and make like he's coming hard and then back off and just kind of keep it, have the lineman in front of him, have him his arms extended and be watching Perkins. And the whole day we did a lot of that. We were trying to just keep it in front of us, keep him in front of us, and they were able to get yardage on little short and intermediate routes. That was their game. A lot of the game, even the drives down the field, were intermediate outcuts, intermediate in cuts. We were keeping it in front of us. They were able to put a lot of yards on the board, but as a result, the score didn't dictate what they needed.
Who's number one in the country in yards allowed per game?
That would be us?
That would be you.
Oh, all right. I didn't know if it was us.
Who'd be number one in points allowed per game?
That would be us.
So
I know that because
Ohio State is 2 and 3 respectively in those two categories. So strap your helmets on.
This
one's
baby's
gonna
be
interesting.
good.
Points per game. Ohio State's number 1. Clemson's number 4. Yards per game. Clemson's number 3. Ohio State's number 5. I mean, this game is going to be an interesting game. But don't listen. I've watched this. I've watched too many teams. There's not a team I've seen empty the bench more than Clemson this year, and I think that's not only to them going forward, but to put those numbers up and still play a lot of young guys. I respect that. I don't care who you say. You can tell me their competition all you want, blah, 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 blah. But the fact is, when you unload the cover and let young guys, I watched it. Florida State was famous for this when they were great. They had some of the best defenses I've ever seen. And we would put in I remember we used to do this. We would put in our freshmen, and then all of a sudden the team would, the young guys and the team would drive down to the 20, and they put the starters right back in to keep them from getting a shutout. Like, Clemson doesn't even do that, and they contain yards. So one of my point is that it's easy, especially when you rotate in guys, to get a lot of cheap yards. Number 1 in the country.
Yep.
Number 1 in the country.
So, as it sits now, we win the game, like I said, 62. Was it 62-17?
Yep.
Virginia, credit to them. They get a New Year's Eve bowl. They'll get to take on Florida, which I love that. ACC-SEC matchup, 8 p.m. ESPN, Monday, December 30th. Orange Bowl, baby. That's a good one. We could use for the conference them to take a win. And as for my Tigers, we will travel out to Arizona and take on the number 2 Ohio State Buckeyes on December 28th. We will be the late game. That's the 8 p game, I believe.
Fiestivus for the rest of us.
Fiesta Bowl. All right, let's talk about the last game, and that involves the team we will be playing, the number 2 Ohio State Buckeyes. They went into the week at number 1. They take on the number 8 seed, Wisconsin, who had 2 losses. They had beaten Wisconsin a few weeks back, 38-7. This is the Big Ten championship game. It was in Indianapolis at 8 o'clock on Saturday. And, well, the game started out in Wisconsin, for a while. It looked like they had control. The first half, Wisconsin owned.
Absolutely. It was 21-7 at halftime. Now, what I saw in this was, one, Jonathan Taylor ran like he ran before the Illinois game. The offensive line was just manhandling them. They were running at times at Chase Young and getting through on that. Not to say Chase Young was playing poorly. Again, he's like a Khalil Mack kind of guy where he's going to get all kinds of extra attention, and he did in this game. What the difference to me in this game was in the first half was Cone. Cone was awesome.
Played the game of his life.
Especially on the ground. He ran for some tough first downs. He did some good play fakes. Also threw some nice balls. Cephas looked good in this game.
Yep, ran for a touchdown.
Yep, yeah. That was his running touchdown was right before the end of the half, which was kind of like because Ohio State was 14-0, and Ohio State had mounted a long drive back the other way and scored.
Yep.
And then they had come back down the field quickly. I think there was only like 36 seconds left in the half or something crazy like that. And they got two big plays, a big passing play. Then they got obviously the running play from Cone. And Ohio State looked out of sorts.
Yep.
It didn't look any. I have not seen Ohio State play a half of football. And a telling stat was it was in. I want to say it was in the first like 4 or 5 minutes of the second quarter. They flashed up on the screen. Ohio State had only been behind for 6 minutes and like 37 seconds all year. And at that point in the game, they had already been behind for like 9.5 minutes or something like that. So it was like, whoa, that uncharted territory. Remember, we've talked a lot about this. First, it was talking about seeing Justin Fields having to play, having to throw balls that were in tough contention because he hadn't had a lot of that through most of the season. And he showed that. He did that against Penn State. He did it. He's done it a few times this season. And then he did against Wisconsin. But then the other part was, could this Ohio State team handle adversity that they had not seen at all this year? And then the second half came.
Yeah.
And in fairness, understand, Justin Fields was injured in this game. He's got an MCL issue is what came out, right? That's what you find out. Sprained MCL, which I can tell you from my own experience is very painful. Did not have the juking so much when he ran, but he ran well. A lot of straight ahead, but he's a big, powerful kid. And he was effective with his legs in this game, surprisingly. And that was even early on, even though they weren't able to finish anything during this game. I think he did. Did he not have a fumble, though, I believe, earlier in the game?
Yes, he did.
But he was running more effectively than I thought he would. I would have been really concerned if all I saw him was play in the pocket because that's not what he's done all year. So why don't you hit us with this second half and what happened?
Well, yeah, I mean, they go. Wisconsin's winning 21-7, and they come out in the second half, and Ohio State proceeds to put 17 points on. Wisconsin can't answer. So now we're going to the fourth, and this thing's a game. I mean, you can't. A game like Ohio State, when it's 21-7, you got to try to put them away. I'm not saying, they needed to match their 17, but you got to put some points on the board there and continue to hold your lead. And then they go into the fourth, and Ohio State puts 10 on the board to Wisconsin 0, ends up winning the game 34-21. The funny thing to me is I mean, if you look at a lot of the statistics, they're fairly even.
Yep.
Ohio State ran 28 plays, Wisconsin ran 23. Ohio State had 28 first downs to Wisconsin's 23. Ohio State ran 78 plays for 492 yards, and Wisconsin ran 71 plays for 432 yards. Ohio State had the ball 31 minutes and change. Wisconsin had the ball 28 minutes and change. I mean, it was fairly close with, even the rushing yards. It was 200 rushing yards for Wisconsin to 172 for Ohio State. The difference really came in the passing. I mean, the Ohio State had 320 to Wisconsin's 232, and but I give credit to Wisconsin and to Jonathan Taylor because going into this game, he had not had a successful game in his career against Ohio State.
Yep.
And unfortunately, this was a loss. But the dude had 20 carries for $148 and a TD, and it was really disappointing that, I didn't like the play call at the end of the game where they got the ball out wide to him. Chase Young took him down. It was a 4th down call, and that pretty much sealed the game for him. I didn't think it was a good play call. I didn't think it was a good use of of Taylor's talents to have him out there like that. If you're going to run it, just let him run it up the middle.
To me, what it came down to was, and this is kind of an interesting thing and something that's going to be very important to get Fields more healthy than he was. He was sacked 5 times in this game because his ability to quickly move laterally is clearly impeded by this injury. But this came down to the fact that Fields could prove that he can stand in the pocket and deliver the ball, and their ability to pass the ball downfield was far greater than Wisconsin, especially in the second half.
Yeah.
And so there was just too many ponies for Ohio State that Wisconsin couldn't counter. They couldn't rely on that. You couldn't rely on Cone for the passing the way you wanted to, whereas Ohio State could. And again, Cone was only sacked twice, so they slowed down, and especially I give a lot of credit to Jonathan Taylor in the game he had to slow down that pass rush a bit. But I think it came down to it, and I think Justin Fields showed me something in this game. He showed me a lot.
My question for you is this, because you know as well as I do, because I've had the MCL problems too. They're not going to go get surgery done because surgery will take 4 to 6 weeks usually on something like that, even if they accelerate it.
Well, and if it's sprained, a sprain is generally, I don't know what grade it is, but a sprain is a mild tear, which in an MCL, you generally do not want to fix those with surgery. Surgery is generally relegated to a significant to complete tear of anything. And usually if you completely tear your MCL, it's because you lost your ACL with it.
Yeah. Well, the question is it doesn't – will 4 weeks be enough time to get that thing to 100% to where he can move? I don't know. I don't honestly think.
I think he'll move better. I think he's braced. He's braced.
If he gets hit the wrong way, then he's right.
Sure.
You know as well as I do that it'll put him right back where he was.
And any sprain you misstep, here's the thing: is you can play with it. It's a pain thing. It's not with the brace. His leg will be as stable as he allows. But if you'll remember when you did it, I'm sure you will. I'll give you an example. When I did it, I was in college. And someone would talk to me, and I would just turn my head to the side, but your body moves a little bit, and I would go, "Oh my God!" You would feel it.
Yep.
Now, granted, I'm no athlete like Justin Fields. I don't have access to the training and all that stuff, and the recuperating process and the trainers and all that. So I do think he will be better. But it is one of those things when you tweak it. The problem is you notice it, and then it's in your head, and. So does that change the way that he physically responds in a game? And I look, he's going to play. I think he'll be better health-wise than he was because time cures that kind of stuff. I hope he does. To me, I'll be honest, I told you this. I don't think Ohio State should have lost its number 1 spot. I'm just being honest. I had said it. We've said it a few times. To me, Ohio State versus Clemson is the national championship, is what I believe. Now, I could be wrong. I think LSU is a very, very good team. I do think LSU is going to handle Oklahoma. But my point is he's going to get all he can handle with that Clemson defense. And probably the worst thing for him, Chase Young, you can at least put a few guys on and kind of corner him, and you can run at him and hopefully offset some of that, kind of which is like what Wisconsin did. And certainly Etienne is capable of doing that at the backfield. The challenge is you can put Isaiah Simmons, and I don't know that you'd spy him because I don't know you have to spy him so much, but Isaiah Simmons tracking that guy down, him on a bum wheel, that ain't a fair race.
We've said about the game, those 2 guys, Chase Young and Isaiah Simmons being the only 2 guys left in this thing that are game changers. I said it this morning to you. I would have preferred going in to play Ohio State in the title game. However, if something does make me feel a little more comfortable playing him now, again, because we have a month to prepare for him, okay, as opposed to the a week and a half you have after this for the championship game. On top of that, we just played a guy that is their whole team at the quarterback position, both running and throwing. And we played that game where we used Isaiah as a spy. So it was good practice for us. But we'll see, man.
This is a game loaded with storylines.
Oh, this will be a great
Loaded
game.
with
It'll be a
storylines.
great game.
Two quarterbacks that were 1 and 2 coming out of high school
Yeah.
together. I mean, this is loaded with storylines.
Yep.
Both from Georgia.
Both from right up the road. One was
Actually,
in Kennesaw, one was in
Cartersville,
which
yep.
is, if you're not familiar, you're talking about a 10-mile differential.
Yep.
Um,
Did they ever play each other in high school? Probably not. I would
I
assume
don't think
they're different
so, 'cause they're
counties.
different divisions.
Yeah.
Ohio State goes away winning this game 34-21. The reason they dropped, is because they played the number 8 team. They were struggling. They were losing in the first half and had to come back. And LSU played the number 4 team and dominated them all the way through. And that's why.
Yeah. Listen, I understand there was the logic behind it. I just believe that teams that they didn't just overcome adversity. I mean, they came trucking back, and that is impressive to me. And you're going to have to do that in this college football playoff. Every one of these teams that wins is going to see this at some point. Now, LSU might not see it till the championship game if they win and beat Oklahoma soundly, but they're going to see it against a Clemson or Ohio State.
And if you don't forget, I mean, like, what was it? Well, not allowed 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we played Ohio State in Arizona in the semis, 31-0. And that was a game they had horses. It was more than 2 years ago. It was 1, 2. It might have been back in 16 because they had Zeke. I think they had Michael. They had a lot of players.
They did, but I don't think they were near as defensively dominant as they were. I think this will be a good game. I've said it. I like Clemson this year. I think everybody's sleeping on the Giants.
Wisconsin gets we said it before, the Rose Bowl, Oregon, January 1st, 5 p.m. ESPN. And we will play the late game in Arizona, the Fiesta Bowl against number 2 now, Ohio State, 8 p.m. ESPN, Saturday, December 28th.
What time is the other? What time is
the other one's at 4. 4 and 8. 4 and 8 for your playoff semis.
I will be on a 1-day divorce from my wife.
There you go. So this should be fun. Hopefully my Tigers take care of business. Not sure if I'm going to make it out there. It has been a question. Kind of hoping we win this game and I can just drive down to New Orleans here from Atlanta rather than take a flight to Arizona. But I'm excited. I'm glad we're back in it. And I think that this could be, sans the other game, which don't put Oklahoma just out to pasture completely.
Well,
I'm hoping
we'll have a full deep dive into those games as we go through this.
We will. But our game should definitely be a slobber knocker.
Yep.
So that's going to wrap it up for the recap of Championship Week. We appreciate you listening. We'll dice and slice. We'll get more stuff out there regarding the rankings and the semi discussion. And next week we'll probably dive into some of those other bowl games that are going to be fun.
Yep.
But we do appreciate it. We'll see you next time, as always, on the gridiron. Have a wonderful day.